There is a question I want every soul in this room to ask itself tonight. How many of us are tired, but not physically tired? I'm talking about a deeper exhaustion, the kind that sleep cannot fix, the kind that coffee cannot fix, the kind that comes when the heart has been carrying too much for too long. Maybe you are smiling in front of people, but inside, your heart feels heavy. Maybe your life looks fine on the outside, but deep down, something feels disconnected. You pray, but sometimes the sweetness isn't there. You make dua, but sometimes the tears don't come. You scroll, you work, you keep moving, yet your soul whispers, something is missing. And the truth is, many of us enter 2026 with new goals, new plans, new resolutions. But we forgot the most important thing. We try to fix our schedules. We try to fix our productivity. We try to fix our appearance. But we never fixed the place Allah looks at first, our hearts. And tonight, we are not here for motivation. We are here for something deeper. Tonight is about returning to the heart that once felt close to Allah, returning to the soul that once found peace in sujood, returning to the heart that was never meant to carry this dunya alone, because when the heart is fixed, everything changes, and when the heart reconnects with Allah, even the most tired soul finds its way back to light. The room was full of people, laughter moving from one corner to another, conversations overlapping, phones lighting up with messages and notifications. In the middle of it all sat a young man who looked completely fine to everyone around him. He smiled at the right moments, nodded when people spoke, even laughed when a joke was made. If someone looked at him from the outside, they would say his life was good, stable job, decent income, respect from family, a future that looked organized and secure. But inside him, there was a quiet heaviness he could not explain. Every morning he woke up, not because he felt rested, but because he had to. The alarm would ring, and for a few seconds he would stare at the ceiling, feeling a strange emptiness in his chest. Not pain exactly, not sadness exactly, just a weight, like something inside his heart had slowly become tired. He would scroll through his phone before getting out of bed. News, messages, social media, endless videos. Minutes turned into half an hour. Half an hour turned into an hour. His mind was awake, but his heart felt strangely numb. He would rush through the morning routine, breakfast while looking at his phone, a quick glance at the clock. Sometimes he prayed, sometimes he delayed it, telling himself he would make it up later. The days felt like they were moving faster and faster, yet somehow they all felt the same. Work felt most of his hours. Emails, deadlines, meetings, responsibilities. His colleagues respected him because he was dependable. He delivered results. He stayed calm under pressure. But during small, quiet moments, when everyone else left the room, or when his computer screen dimmed after inactivity, he felt that same quiet heaviness return. He could not explain it to anyone because technically nothing was wrong. His family was proud of him. His friends thought he had everything under control. People came to him for advice, for help, for support. He had become the strong one in many people's lives. But even the strong ones have hearts, and his heart had been carrying things silently for a long time. Some nights, he would lie in bed and replay moments from his life. Regrets he never spoke about, mistakes he wished he could undo, words he wished he had never said, opportunities he felt he wasted. The mind is strange in the quiet of the night. It brings back memories you buried long ago. He tried to distract himself from these thoughts. More scrolling, more work, more noise, more conversations. Anything that kept the silence away, because silence made him notice the emptiness. And the emptiness scared him. Once, during a long day, he walked past a masjid he used to pray in years ago. He slowed down without realizing it. The doors were open, and inside the carpet was quiet, peaceful, untouched by the chaos outside. A few older men were sitting in the corners, making decor softly. For a moment, something inside him stirred. A memory. He remembered a younger version of himself walking into masjids without hesitation. A time when his heart felt lighter, when sujud felt comforting, instead of rushed when du'at came easily without searching for words. He stood outside the door for a few seconds. Then his phone vibrated. A message from work. The moment passed. He walked away, telling himself he would come back another time. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The routine continued. Wake up tired, move through the day, smile for people, deliver responsibilities, carry the quiet weight inside. Carry the quiet weight inside. Sometimes he noticed it most when he was surrounded by people. Everyone talking, laughing, sharing plans for the future. And in the middle of all that noise, he would feel strangely distant, as if his heart was watching life instead of living it. He wondered if something was wrong with him. How could someone have so much and still feel this tired inside one evening? He sat alone in his car after work. The engine was off. The city lights flickered outside the windshield. People walked past, busy with their lives. He leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. For the first time in a long time, there was no phone in his hand, no conversation filling the air, no screen demanding attention, just silence. And in that silence, he felt the weight in his chest more clearly than ever. Not the weight of work, not the weight of expectations, the weight of a heart that had been running for so long without returning to the one who created it, a heart that had been trying to carry that dunya alone, a heart that had slowly grown distant from the one who was always closest. The night was quiet in a way that felt almost heavy. The world outside had slowed down. Street lights flickered softly through the window, and the distant sound of a car passing every few minutes reminded him that life was still moving somewhere beyond the walls of his room. But inside that room, everything felt still. He sat on the edge of his bed, his phone lying face down beside him. The screen had been lighting up all evening with notifications, messages, updates, endless distractions. But for once, he had stopped looking at it. His eyes felt tired, but sleep refused to come. It had been one of those days where nothing dramatic happened, yet everything felt exhausting. Conversations felt forced, smiles felt heavy. Even the smallest tasks seemed to drain energy from somewhere deep inside him. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. There was a strange feeling in his chest, like something had been building up for months, maybe even years. And tonight, it was pressing harder than usual. He tried to shake it off. He stood up and walked around the room, picked up his phone, scrolled for a few seconds, put it down again, opened the video, then closed it halfway through. Every distraction felt empty. The silence returned. On the wall across the room hung a small framed verse he had placed there years ago. It had been there so long that he barely noticed it anymore. Tonight, his eyes stopped on it. The words spoke about Allah's mercy. He stared at the frame longer than usual. Something inside him shifted. He suddenly became aware of how long it had been since he had spoken to Allah with honesty. Not the quick prayers rushed between... Not the quick prayers rushed between responsibilities. Not the mechanical words recited while the mind wandered elsewhere. Real conversation, real dua, the kind where the heart actually speaks. He looked at the clock. It was late, the kind of hour when most homes are asleep, when the world becomes quiet enough for a person to hear their own thoughts clearly. For a moment he hesitated. Then he slowly stood up. The room felt different as he walked toward the small space where he usually prayed. The prayer mat had been folded neatly in the corner. It had been used, of course, but often quickly, sometimes distractedly. Tonight, he unfolded it with unusual care. The sound of the fabric touching the floor echoed softly in the quiet room. He stood there for a moment, unsure of what he was about to feel, when he raised his hands for takir. The familiar words left his lips, but something about them felt heavier than usual. Allahu Akbar. As he began the prayer, his mind tried to wander like it usually did. Thoughts about work, conversations from earlier in the day, random worries, but tonight the distractions felt weaker. When he bowed, he stayed there longer than usual. And he stood again. His chest felt tight. Then came the moment of sujud. His forehead touched the ground, and suddenly something inside him cracked. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was simply the quiet breaking of a wall that had been standing for too long. At first it was just a deep breath. Then another. His hands trembled slightly against the prayer mat. For months he had been carrying emotions he never allowed himself to express. Stress he dismissed. Regrets he buried. Questions he ignored. Guilt he pretended was not there. All of it had been sitting inside his heart, layer upon layer. And in that single moment of sujud, with his forehead on the ground and no one around to see him, the weight finally surfaced. A tear slipped from his eye onto the prayer mat. He stayed there longer. Another tear followed, then another. Soon the quiet room was filled with the soft sound of someone trying to hold back emotions that no longer wanted to stay hidden. His dua did not start with perfect words. At first, there were only broken sentences. Ya Allah, a pause. Another breath. I'm tired. The words came out almost like a whisper, but they carried the weight of months. He spoke about things he had never said out loud before. The pressure he felt, the mistakes that haunted him, the emptiness that had been growing quietly inside his chest. His voice trembled as he spoke. Sometimes he stopped because the tears made it hard to continue. But for the first time in a long time, He was not pretending to be strong, not pretending to have everything under control. It was just him and Allah, the one who had always known every thought before it formed, the one who had seen every silent struggle, the one who had been waiting for this moment long before he even realized he needed it. Minutes passed, though it felt outside the normal sense of time. The heaviness in his chest slowly began to loosen, not because every problem had disappeared, but because the heart that had been carrying everything alone had finally placed its weight somewhere else. His tears slowed. His breathing became calmer. The prayer mat beneath him was slightly damp, where his forehead had rested. And in that quiet moment of sujood, the same place where he had cried, he felt something he had not felt for a very long time. Relief, not loud, not overwhelming, just a gentle peace settling quietly into a heart that had been exhausted for far too long. There was a time in his life when he believed he had gone too far, too many mistakes, too many delays, too many moments when he knew the right thing to do, yet chose something else. At first, the distance between him and Allah had been small, almost unnoticeable. A prayer delayed here, a habit justified there, a moment of laziness when his heart whispered to stand for Salah. But he answered, later. Later became tomorrow. Tomorrow became weeks, and weeks quietly became years. Life continued, moving forward. Responsibilities grew heavier. Work demanded more attention. People expected more from him. And slowly, without realizing it, his connection with Allah became something that existed mostly in memories. There were still moments when the reminder would reach him. The adhan echoing from a nearby mashda, a Quran verse shared by someone online, a khutbah he heard while passing by. For a few seconds, his heart would feel something stir. But then the feeling would fade as quickly as it arrived. A voice inside him began to whisper things he did not question at first. You've messed up too much. You've messed up too much. You're not the kind of person who suddenly becomes religious again. People like you don't just return like nothing happened. And the more he listened to those whispers, the heavier his heart became. He stopped trying. Not because he hated faith, but because he believed he had already failed it. Sometimes he would see people leaving the masjid after prayer, their faces calm and peaceful, and something inside him would ache quietly. He would watch them for a moment before looking away, feeling like he no longer belonged in spaces like that. The strange thing was that the distance did not erase his awareness of Allah. If anything, it made it stronger, because deep down he knew every blessing he still had. He knew every time Allah protected him from something he never saw coming. He knew every moment when things worked out in ways that could not be explained by coincidence, but instead of bringing him closer, those realizations sometimes made him feel more ashamed. One evening he sat with a group of friends at a cafe. The conversation was light and casual, people laughing about small things, sharing stories from work and daily life. At some point, one of them mentioned a lecture they had recently attended about Allah's mercy. Someone else quoted a hadith they had heard. The conversation moved on quickly, but the words stayed in his mind. Allah's mercy. He had heard those words his entire life. But tonight, they felt different. Later that night, as he drove home through quiet streets, Those two words repeated in his thoughts again and again. Mercy, mercy, mercy. When he entered his house, the silence wrapped around him. The lights were dim, the room still. He sat down on the couch and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. A question formed slowly in his mind. What if the voice telling him he was too far gone was wrong? He sat there thinking about it, thinking about every moment he believed Allah was disappointed in him, beyond forgiveness, thinking about every bite. Time. He assumed the door was already closed. Then another thought entered his mind, softer but stronger. If Allah truly did not want him back, why did the thought of returning still exist in his heart? Why did guilt still exist? Why did that small lack appear every time he heard the adhan? Why did his heart still react when he heard verses of the Quran? The realization came quietly. The very fact that his heart still felt something meant it was not dead. And if it was not dead, then maybe it was not abandoned either. He stood up slowly and walked toward the shelf where a Quran rested. It had been there for years, sometimes opened, often untouched. He picked it up gently, as if holding something fragile. When he opened the pages, the familiar script looked both comforting and unfamiliar at the same time. His eyes moved slowly across the lines. The words spoke about Allah's mercy again and again, about forgiveness, about doors that remain open, about a Lord who does not turn away those who return to Him sincerely. His chest tightened as he read. All those years he had been convinced that Allah had turned away from him. But the Quran was telling a completely different story. The distance had never been from Allah's side. The door had never actually closed. The mercy had never disappeared. The one he believed he had lost had been there the entire time, closer than he allowed himself to believe, closer during the mistakes, closer during the silence, closer during every moment he thought he was walking alone. And slowly, as that realization settled into his heart, the weight he had been carrying began to shift into something else. Not pride, not relief from responsibility, but hope.